Ahoy, Planeswalkers, this is Eric, also known as Scallywag of the Bane Fleet, and today I'm bringing you a deck tech video on my Admiral Beckett Brass deck. But first, I'd like to remind you to please hit that like button or that subscribe button. It helps out a lot. So, Beckett Brass is a 3/3 human pirate for 1, a blue, black, and a red. And she says, other pirates you control get +1/+1. And at the beginning of your end step, gain control of target non-land permanent controlled by a player who has dealt combat damage by 3 or more pirates this turn. Well, what I like about Brass is that she's a lord. And if you haven't noticed, there were no other pirate lords printed. She's the only one. Next, I obviously like her ability to steal permanents, but it can also turn the table against us if we're not careful in who we attack and what we decide to gain control of. The second ability, though, is the one I want to capitalize on most, so I've included many evasive pirates and some things that will make our pirates evasive as well. I've also included multiple extra turn spells so we can make sure we get as many of those end steps as possible. Now, out of our 33 creatures, the deck runs 23 pirates, 6 creatures that can become pirates, and 1 spell that can make some pirate tokens. I built this deck around winning a fair game rather than comboing off, so I did not include any ultimate combo cards with win conditions like Revel In Riches, but feel free to do so in your own brews. This is more of an aggro strategy, synergizing with the creatures and our commander, but that being said, I've tried to make that strategy as powerful as possible. So, here we go. Let's get into the pirates. Starting with Deadeye Navigator, our only 1-drop in the deck. If you know anything about me, I'm not a big fan of 1-drops, but I included it because it's a pirate. It has the potential of getting bigger. If you're going to have a 1-drop, at least make sure it's something that can become bigger, excuse me, in the long run. So Deadeye Tracker is a 1/1 human pirate for 1 black, and you can pay 1 and a black and tap it to exile 2 target cards from an opponent's graveyard, and Deadeye Tracker explores, which means you reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, then put the card back or put it into your graveyard. So, that can get us a land, or it can pump up Deadeye Tracker if it's not a land. And so, I like 1/1 creatures that, ramp us up as long as they're going to have, a huge toughness so they can hopefully stick around a while longer. So, continuing, we got Kari Zev, Skyship Raider, 1 and a red, for a 1/3 human pirate, which is a first strike and menace, and whenever Kari Zev, Skyship Raider attacks, create a 2/1 legendary red monkey creature token named Ragavan that's tapped and attacking. Exile that token at the end of combat. So Kari Zev is pretty evasive herself, and your opponents, they're going to want to block the monkey. They're going to want to block one of them, so usually I guess they're going to try to block the monkey out of the deal, but she's a decent 2-drop. We have a lot of low-cast creatures in this deck because it's just all about, like I said, getting in quick, getting in fast, trying to steal their permanents as soon as possible, and hopefully trying to steal some kind of bomb as soon as possible. So Kari Zev helps us do that a lot with, menace. Things like menace, flying, creatures that can't be blocked. So we got Daring Saboteur, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 human pirate, and you can pay 3, and Daring Saboteur can't be blocked this turn. And whenever Daring Saboteur deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So, Daring Saboteur is perfect for this strategy, just that it can't be blocked by paying some mana, and it will also draw some cards, which is just what we need because there aren't a lot of pirates that, can consistently draw us cards, and, when they are drawing us cards, it's like pretty slow, 1 at a time, so he's probably one of the best card draw engines in the deck as far as pirates go. Next we have Kite Freebooter, 1 and a black for a 1/2 human pirate with flying. When Kite Freebooter enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature or non-land card, or non-creature non-land card from it. Exile that card until Kite Freebooter leaves the battlefield. So normally abilities like this that just, exile a card from an opponent's hand or something like that are not things I really like in Commander at all. But what I like about Kite Freebooter is it's a flyer for 2 mana. It's a flying pirate for 2 mana, and that's what Admiral Beckett Brass needs. Again, just get those flyers in as soon as possible, dealing that combat damage, stealing some of the opponent's permanents. And of course, exiling a card from someone's hand isn't bad. Next we have Direfleet Captain, a black and a red for a 2/2 Orc Pirate. When Direfleet Captain attacks, it gets +1/+1 until the end of the turn for each other attacking pirate. So hopefully we're attacking with at least 3 pirates, so this will be at least getting +2/+2. So that's a pretty sweet deal. 4/4 for 2 mana. I mean, this guy can get huge. Actually, a really great card for pirate decks, especially if you have some way to make pirate tokens. I really wish Wizards would make more pirate stuff. I mean, why'd they stop? There's not enough. Still, there needs to be more. Next we have Stormfleet Swashbuckler, 1 and a red for a 2/2 human pirate, which has Ascend, so if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game, as long as you control those permanents when you cast this, or if you just control this and you eventually get 10 or more permanents, you get Ascend. And Stormfleet Swashbuckler says when it has double strike as long as you have the City's Blessing. So potentially a 2/2 double strike for 2 mana. Pretty awesome deal. Next we have Fathom Fleet Captain for 1 and a black. It's a 2/1 human pirate with menace. Whenever Fathom Fleet Captain attacks, if you control another non-token pirate, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, create a 2/2 black pirate creature token with menace. So probably one of the most important cards in the deck, just that it can make us, tokens. We don't have many ways to make pirate tokens yet, so we really like to keep Fathom Fleet Captain around so we can have lots of pirates. Try to go wide. Next we have Direfleet Daredevil, 1 and a red for a 2/1 human pirate with first strike. When Direfleet Daredevil enters the battlefield, exile target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast that card this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. If that card would be put into a graveyard this turn, you exile it instead. So you get to cast one of your opponent's spells for free. Really similar to a, one of these guys over here. What do you call this guy? The blue guy. Can't remember every card name off the top of my head, but I will soon. But yeah, instead of casting it from your graveyard, you get to cast it from an opponent's graveyard. Pretty sweet. And it doesn't have flash, but you get to know it's in your opponent's graveyard ahead of time, so I think it's a good card. Anyway, continuing. We got Time Stream Navigator, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 human pirate wizard with Ascend. And you can pay 2 and 2 blue mana, so 4 mana total, and tap it. And you put it on the bottom of its owner's library, and you get to take an extra turn. Activate this ability only if you have the City's Blessing. Pretty sweet. We want to take extra turns so we can get extra end steps and gain control of extra things. Next we have Direfleet Poisoner, a 2/2 human pirate for 1 and a black, which says it has flash, it has death touch, and when Direfleet Poisoner enters the battlefield, target attacking pirate you control gets +1/+1 and gains death touch until the end of the turn. So works as removal. Sometimes you might just want to get this out, without having the synergy with the ability. Fair enough. You want to get pirates out as soon as possible, but more importantly, you do want to use the ability to try to, get rid of one of your opponent's blockers, potentially, or, I mean, that's pretty much, I guess, the only reason you would ever do it. So hopefully your creature gets blocked, and then you'll be able to use this. If it doesn't get blocked, oh well, maybe you'll just cast this at the end of your opponent's end step right before your own upkeep, just so you can have a pseudo hasty creature. Not bad in the deck. Direfleet Poisoner. Next we have Warkite Marauder, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 human pirate with flying. Whenever Kite Marauder attacks, target creature defending player controls loses all abilities and has base power and toughness of 0/1 until the end of the turn. So this is really great, especially with something that can ping your opponents, like Niv Mizzet or something like that, if you're like running a Niv Mizzet deck or something like that. It certainly makes one of our opponent's creatures unable to block, which is just what this deck is looking for. Next we have Departed Deckhand, 1 and a blue for a 2/2 Spirit Pirate. When Departed Deckhand becomes the target of a spell, you have to sacrifice it. Departed Deckhand can't be blocked by spirits, except by spirits, and if you pay 4 mana, another target creature you control can't be blocked this turn except by spirits. So it helps make our team evasive. Unfortunately, it dies really easily to even non-removal spells, but hey, it's a spirit. So I guess that's, I don't know, that really doesn't make sense. I mean, it's not an illusion. So it was good that Wizards printed us a new pirate in the M19 set. I don't understand why it has to die when it becomes the target of a spell. That's usually something that illusions have to do. You know, maybe if it was a pirate illusion, but it's a pirate spirit. So, I don't know. Kind of awkward. Next we have Captain Lannery Storm. For 2 and a red, you get a 2/2 legendary human pirate with haste. And whenever Captain Lannery Storm attacks, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap and sacrifice this artifact to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And whenever you sacrifice a treasure, Lannery Storm gets +1/+0 until the end of the turn. So she gets bigger, she's got haste, so it surprises your opponents, and hopefully, you know, they don't think you're going to be able to attack, and so maybe they leave themselves open, and she can get in with that damage, hopefully, so Beckett Brass can steal someone's permanent. Next we have Lightning Rig Crew, 2 and a red for a 0/5 Goblin Pirate, and you can tap Lightning Rig Crew to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever you cast a pirate spell, you untap Lightning Rig Crew. So if you have something like Hazoret's Monument out, where making all of your red spells 1 less to cast, and then you're just casting, several pirates in a turn, this is going to be dealing several damage to each of your opponents that turn. So pretty powerful little pirate. Unfortunately, it's you might think, like I was just thinking incorrectly, that Lightning Rig Crew can't trigger Admiral Beckett Brass's second ability, but if you remember her first ability, she's going to make Lightning Rig Crew a 1/6, actually. So Lightning Rig Crew can get in combat damage and allow you to steal permanents with Admiral Beckett Brass on the battlefield. Next we have Forerunner of the Coalition, 2 and a black for a 2/2 human pirate, and when Forerunner of the Coalition enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a pirate card, reveal it, and then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. And whenever another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. So put this aside for now, and we'll look at what pirates we'll be tutoring up. But out of the pirates we've already looked at, I'd say we'd probably maybe get a Dire Fleet Captain, just if we need some kind of huge creature. That's considering we have lots of creatures on the battlefield. If we want to go wide, we're going to get Fathom Fleet Captain to make pirate tokens. If we need to take an extra turn, we're going to get Time Stream Navigator. And if we need to ramp, we're going to get Lannery Storm, so we can make those treasure tokens. There's also a couple other pirates that will allow us to ramp that we might get. Also, we might get Dire Fleet Daredevil if one of our opponents has a juicy instant or sorcery in their graveyard. So yeah, those are some of the cards you might want to search for with Forerunner of the Coalition. Next we have Stormfleet Sprinter, 1 a blue and a red for a 2/2 human pirate with haste that can't be blocked. So absolutely perfect for this deck. I wish more of the pirates were just this perfect for it. Yeah, haste can't be blocked. That's exactly what Beckett Brass wants. You're part of the crew. No questions asked. Next we have Slippery Scoundrel, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human pirate with Ascend, and as long as you have the City's Blessing, Slippery Scoundrel has hexproof and can't be blocked. Same thing, you're on the crew. Definitely exactly what this deck wants, something who can't be blocked and who's going to stick around. Excellent. Next we have Protean Raider, 1 a blue and a red for a shapeshifter pirate. That's a 2/2 and it has raid. So if you attacked with a creature this turn, you may have Protean Raider enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. And there's actually several creatures like this. This is the only one that's a pirate. But I have several sort of clone creatures in the deck, which are going to hopefully enter the battlefields as copies of pirates. Like I said earlier, we have 6 creatures that can become pirates and 1 spell that can make some pirate tokens. That's not the token creating creature I was talking about, but we have 1 other, normal spell that's going to create tokens as well. So Protean Raider is our first shapeshifter, and who knows, maybe it won't be a pirate when you finally cast it, because maybe there's just going to be some Ulamog or some other huge bomb on the battlefield that you want to make a copy of yourself. Today I played a game with this deck and I used this to make a copy of Azusa so I could get more land drops. Next you have Hostage Taker, and yeah, this is the one I was thinking of, the other choice you might want to be looking for when you cast Forerunner of the Coalition. So Hostage Taker is 2 a blue and a black for a 2/3 human pirate, and when it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. So this will exile something at first, and then as long as it sticks around long enough for you to get your mana back, then usually turn 5 you can be casting something of your opponent's. But if it's later in the game, then maybe you'll have enough mana to cast that thing right away. Most of the time you'll have to wait a turn and hopefully have the mana later to cast the permanent that you stole. Next we have Direfleet Neckbreaker, 2 a black and a red for a 3/2 orc pirate, and says attacking pirates get +2/+0. Yeah, excellent. Next we have Crafty Cutpurse is a 2/2 human pirate for 3 and a blue who has flash, and when Crafty Cutpurse enters the battlefield, each token that would be created under an opponent's control this turn is created under your control instead. It doesn't always work, but when it does, it's really awesome. Next we have Pitiless Plunder, 3 and a black for a 1/4 human pirate that says whenever another creature you control dies, you create a treasure token. So yeah, sweet. Whenever something you control dies, you get to ramp. Next we have Angrath's Marauders, 5 and 2 red for a 4/4 human pirate that says if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. So, not going to make you many friends, but hopefully going to win you the game. Alright, next we have our creatures that aren't exactly pirates that become pirates really easily, such as Metallic Mimic, 2 mana for a 2/1 artifact shapeshifter, and as Metallic Mimic enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and it is the chosen type in addition to its other types, so you're going to choose pirates, and each other creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So like I said, we don't have many lords for pirates, so we need something like Metallic Mimic to act like a lord. Same thing with Adaptive Automaton, 3 generic for a 2/2 artifact construct, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and it is that type in addition to its other types, and it says other creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, so another lord. Next we have Tarian Mauler, 2 generic and a red for a 2/2 shapeshifter, which has changeling, so this card is every creature type at all times. So it's a pirate, it's a demon, it's an angel, it's an imp, it's a monkey. And when an opponent casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Tarian Mauler, so this is a pirate that has the potential of getting really, really big. Next we have Sakashima the Imposter, 2 generic and 2 blue for a 3/1 human rogue. And as Sakashima enters the battlefield, you may choose a creature in play. If you do, Sakashima comes into play as a copy of that creature, except its name is still Sakashima, and it's still legendary, and it gains, pay 2 mana and 2 blue to return Sakashima the Imposter to its owner's hand at the end of the turn. So what's really great about Sakashima is she's sort of the best clone-type creature in the game, because she can even clone another legendary creature because her name still is Sakashima the Imposter. You know, so she could even be a clone of Admiral Beckett Brass if we have Admiral Beckett Brass on the battlefield, and we won't have to sacrifice Admiral Beckett Brass because Sakashima's name is still going to be Sakashima. And if we want to change it to something else, we can pay 4 mana and return it to our hand and cast it again and have it become a copy of something else. Really cool clone creature. Next we have Lazar the Multifarious, 1 and a black for a 1/3 shapeshifter, and when Lazar enters the battlefield, you surveil 1, so you look at the top card of your library and you may put it into your graveyard or put it back, and you can pay X, and Lazar the Multifarious becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with converted mana cost X, except its name is still Lazar the Multifarious. It's legendary in addition to its other types, and it has this ability. So Lazar has the ability to change into multiple creatures, not only within the same turn, but within the same phase. You know, you can just instant speed, do this over and over again, and combo off and do lots of things. For our deck, all he's doing is just being a pirate, you know? He's just on a vacation, which for Lazar means, you know, doing a bit of piracy. Next we have Vizier of Many Faces, 2 and 2 blue for a Shapeshifter Cleric. That's a 0/0, except you may have Vizier of Many Faces enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except its name, except if it was embalmed. The token has no mana cost, it's white, and it's a zombie in addition to its other types. So you can embalm it for 3 and 2 blue mana, which means you can basically cast this card again from your graveyard for 3 and 2 blue mana. You exile it and you make a token that's a copy of this card, and that token also enters as a copy. So what I like about this is it enters as a copy, and when that dies, it can enter as a copy of something else again. Next we have our creatures that are definitely not pirates and are never going to become pirates because I didn't include adaptive adaptation in this deck, but these are cards that really work well with the deck. So first we have Marchesa the Black Rose, 1 a blue, black, and a red for a 3/3 legendary human wizard with Dethrone. Whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and other creatures you control have Dethrone. And whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So what I like about this is she can give your whole team a +1/+1 counter, and then if any of those creatures die, they all just come back again. So you can board wipe yourself, and all of your creatures come back, including Marchesa, if she has a +1/+1 counter on it, on her. Pretty amazing. Yeah. Really great with the pirate deck. For some people, this is the commander of the pirate deck, but you know, I'm having more fun with it, so I'm playing Admiral Beckett Brass. Next we have Wonder, 3 and a blue for a 2/2 incarnation with flying, and as long as Wonder is in your graveyard and you control an island, creatures you control have flying, which is exactly what this deck wants. We want all of our creatures to have flying so we can get in that damage and gain control of a permanent with Admiral Beckett Brass. Next we have Thassa, God of the Sea, 2 and a blue for a legendary enchantment creature god who's a 5/5 with indestructible, and as long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa actually isn't a creature, and each blue mana symbol in the mana cost of permanents you control counts towards your devotion to blue. So Thassa herself is going to give you 1 devotion if you have Beckett Brass out, and Thassa you're going to have 2 devotion, and so on. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to scry 1. That's a great ability right there. That's one that you want to put a dice on top of your deck to remind yourself, because you're going to forget for sure. Even experienced players forget. you know, so we always put something on top of our deck to remind ourselves to scry one at the beginning of our upkeep before we draw a card. Next, we can pay 1 and a blue mana and give any creature we control unblockable. So that's almost the most important ability, though, you know, like I said, we love scrying one at the beginning of each turn too. Honestly, Thassa God of the Sea kind of goes in every single blue deck, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to even make a Thassa commander deck. That'd be pretty sweet. So anyway, yeah, giving all of our creatures evasion is exactly what we want with Admiral Beckett Brass. Next we have Erebos, God of the Dead. 3 and a black for a 5/7 legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible, and as long as your devotion to black is less than 5, Erebos isn't a creature. And Erebos says your opponents can't gain life, so that's going to help us win the game. And we can also pay 1 and a black and pay 2 life and draw a card. Yeah, pretty sweet. Drawing cards. Next we have Nezha, Primal Tide. 5 generic and 2 blue for a 7/7 Elder Dinosaur. Nezha can't be countered. You have no maximum hand size. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you draw a card, and you can discard 3 cards, exile Nezha, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So Nezha is really amazing. If you know anything about me, I put Nezha in a lot of decks because it's just great at drawing you cards. It's great at protecting itself. You have no maximum hand size. It can't even be countered. You know, even in response to combat damage, you can just discard the 3 cards to exile it and have it return to the battlefield tapped at the beginning of the next end step. Really, really amazing card. Fits just great in any blue deck, including this one. Next, we have our ramp package. We got Soul Ring, Thematic Compass, which is 2 generic for an artifact. You can pay 3 and tap it, and search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 7 or more lands, you transform Thematic Compass into Spires of Orazca, which is a land that you can tap for 1 mana, or you can tap it to untap target attacking creature an opponent controls and remove it from combat. So this is really great at protecting yourself against a huge bomb. You know, whatever your opponent's biggest creature is, you remove it from combat, and you're going to be saving yourself a ton of damage. And it ramps before it transforms, so pretty excellent as Thematic Compass as well. So, next we have Hazoret's Monument, 3 generic for a legendary artifact. Red creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So helping us draw the cards. Next we have Commander's Sphere, 3 generic for an artifact, and you can tap it to add 1 mana to your mana pool of any color in your commander's color identity, or you can sacrifice it to draw a card. And keep in mind, you can always do that after you've tapped it for the mana. So even if someone's gonna blow up Commander Sphere, you know, they're targeting it with a removal spell, you can both tap it to add the mana to your mana pool, float the mana, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card. And maybe the card you draw will be something you can cast for the 1 floating mana. Who knows? You know, like Swords to Plowshares or something. Not in this deck, but, you know, good example. Next, we have Storm the Vault, 2 generic, a blue and a red for a legendary enchantment, which says, whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a colorless treasure token. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 5 or more artifacts, transform Storm of the Vault. So, you know, those tokens are going to count towards your artifacts, obviously. And when you transform Storm of the Vault, it becomes Vault of Catacomb. So Vault of Catacomb is a legendary land that taps to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, or you can tap to add a blue mana to your mana pool for each artifact you control. So hopefully you've created lots of treasure tokens by dealing lots of combat damage, and when this transforms, you can just add tons of mana. This is like an old card that's worth a lot of money, but thankfully this is a lot more budget friendly. Alright, next we have Pull from Tomorrow, X and a blue, and for an instant, and it says draw X cards and then discard a card. Sweet. Next we have Ristic Study, 2 and a blue for an enchantment. And it says, whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1 mana. So definitely one of the most powerful draw card spells in Commander format. Goes in every single blue deck. Perfect in this one as well. You know, we have Nezha. We are also running Reliquary Tower, so we have no maximum hand size. So Ristic Study can get out of control really quick if no one deals with it, and you can be drawing tons of cards. I mean, you could draw your whole deck with this and deck yourself out. That's how powerful it is for just 3 mana. Next we have Future Sight, 2 and 3 blue for an enchantment, and you play with the top card of your library revealed, and you may play the top card of your library. So if it's a land, you play that as your land for turn, then you get to play the next card on top of your library. And if you cast that, then you get to play the next card from the top of your library. So in just one turn, this can net you like 3 cards a turn. I mean, really powerful enchantment if you got the right spells on top of your library. And you know, we got a low mana curve in this deck, so that's definitely possible for us to be getting 3 or 4 cards out of Future Sight a turn. Next we have Toil and Trouble. So this is a fuse card, so you may cast one or both sides of this card as you cast it. And Toil says target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Most of the time that's exactly what we're going to be doing, and we're going to be choosing ourselves just to be drawing some cards. Next we have Trouble, 2 generic and a red, and Trouble deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. So we can also use this to finish off an opponent, make it deal even 2 more damage to them by having them draw 2 cards with Toil and losing 2 life from Toil. You know, so really, if you cast both sides of this, you're going to be dealing the Trouble damage plus an additional 4 damage, you know, from Toil. It's going to be adding 2 more to Trouble and making them lose 2 or more life itself. So, yeah, but like I said, most of the time, just drawing 2 cards. Next, we have Ad Nauseam, 3 generic and 2 black for an instant. Reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. You may repeat this process any number of times. So, you know, you could draw your whole deck with this, though you kill yourself. Definitely a card that can draw us, you know, 4 or 5 cards absolutely with this deck. It's used in a lot of combo decks, but like I said, I'm not comboing off in this deck. I just want a card that can draw me lots of cards. And here is our spell that can make us lots of pirate tokens. Rite of Replication, 2 and 2 blue for a sorcery with kicker 5. You may pay an additional 5 as you cast this spell. And it says you put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of target creature. If it was kicked, you put 5 of those tokens on the battlefield instead. So you could get potentially 5 pirate creature tokens out of this, or, you know, just 5 tokens of any creature on the battlefield, considering it's not legendary. Next we have our extra turn spells. So Temporal Trespass is 8 and 3 blue. That's right, 11 mana for a sorcery that has Delve. So each card you exile from your graveyard while you're casting this spell helps you pay for 1. So you can cast this for potentially just 3 mana. And you get to take an extra turn after this one, and then you exile Temporal Trespass. Next we have Nexus of Fate. Yeah, I got one. 5 and 2 blue for an instant, and you take an extra turn after this one. And if Nexus of Fate would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, you reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. So what I really love about Nexus of Fate is that it's an instant speed spell, so you can cast it at the end of anyone's turn and take an extra turn at the end of that turn. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And what I really love about Nexus of Fate, of course, is that you get to shuffle it back into your library. And, I mean, I've seen people play this and then redraw it again that same turn. I mean, you know, what are the odds, right? But sometimes you just do. Sometimes you just draw it again and you just take another turn and another turn. It gets really ridiculous sometimes. Then we got Karn's Temporal Sundering. 4 and 2 blue for a legendary sorcery, so you may only cast this if you control a legendary creature or a planeswalker. And it says target player takes an extra turn after this one. Return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and then you exile Karn's Temporal Sundering. So you also get to bounce something with this. Pretty sweet. Next we got Counterspell, which is the first of our counter spells. 2 blue, counter target spell. Sweet. Of course it's an instant. Unwind, 2 and a blue. For an instant, counter target non-creature spell and untap up to 3 lands. Mostly non-creature spells are what we want to counter because we want to counter those board wipes. Next we have Ionize, counter target spell. Ionize deals 2 damage to that spell's controller, and that's for 1 a blue and a red. So we counter the spell and deal some damage. Next we have Out of Bounds, 3 generic and a blue. For an instant with assist, so another player can pay up to 3 mana of this spell's cost. So, you know, yeah, your friends can just help you cast this spell, and you only have to pay 1 blue then to counter target spell. Pretty sweet. And it's got some homunculus dudes on there. Pretty awesome artwork. Next we have Hero's Downfall, 1 and 2 black. For an instant, destroy target creature or planeswalker, and this is the first of our removal package here. So what I really like here is that it's instant speed, so, you know, we can cast something, you know, after they've already pumped it up, loaded it with enchantments or something, you know, spent all their mana on it, and then come attacking us, and then we destroy it then, instead of destroying it during our main phase. Next we have Silence the Believers, 2 and 2 black for an instant with Strive, so you can pay 2 and a black more to cast this for each target beyond the first. So you can basically target as many creatures as you want if you have enough mana. And you may exile any number of target creatures and all auras attached to them. So yeah, take that, Estrid the Masked. Next, we have Profane Command, X and 2 black for a sorcery, and you get to choose 2. So target player loses X life, or return target creature card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or target creature gets -X until the end of the turn, or up to X target creatures gain fear until the end of the turn. So what I really like about this in the pirate deck is that, you know, most of the time in other decks we're not choosing the last option, but in this deck, you know, we really care about evasion, so maybe fear is going to become a factor here. You know, fear meaning they can't be blocked except for by black creatures or artifact creatures. And, you know, also you can recur a creature from a graveyard. Most of the time the most sensible choice is going to be to have your opponent lose X life and to kill one of their creatures. Next we have Dictate of Erebos, 3 and 2 black for an enchantment with flash, and it says whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So you flash this in right before your opponent, you know, is gonna single-sided board wipe only your creatures, but then they realize they have to kill all of their creatures as well. So pretty sweet, but, you know, don't feel bad about casting this main phase if you just want to get it out early to deter people from destroying your creatures. Next we have Torment of Hailfire, X and 2 black. For a sorcery, it says repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So, you know, I think I said I didn't have any of these cards in the deck, but I guess I do. Torment of Hailfire can just win you the game all by itself if you have enough mana. In fact, the game I played today with the pirate deck, my opponent won the game by just playing a Torment of Hailfire where X was 17, and, you know, I discarded all cards in my hand, I sacrificed several creatures, and that only added up to like 7, so I still had to, you know, take 30 damage from Torment of Hailfire, and yeah, that was enough to kill me. So often when you play this, you have to explain it to the opponents multiple times, even if people have read the card multiple times. I don't know, I don't kind of understand why people don't understand it. They always go, it happens that many times, and you're like, yes, it happens that many times. It's just too good to be true. They can't believe it. It's wonderful. Alright, so next we have Cyclonic Rifter, 1 and a blue for an instant speed spell. It says, return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, or you can overload this for 7 mana. So if you pay its overload cost, instead you return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. So what's really great about this being instant speed is that you can cast this in response to your opponent going to their discard phase, you know, and then you force them to put all their non-land permanents in their hand, and then they have to discard down to 7, you know. Whereas if you cast this at any other time, you know, they usually have an opportunity to cast the spells in their hand before they can have to discard, but I really like playing it right before their discard phase if I get a chance. Next we have Devastation Tide, 3 and 2 blue for a sorcery that says return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, or you can pay 1 and a blue for its miracle cost. So you can cast this card for its miracle cost when it's the first draw. When you draw it, if it's the first card you drew this turn. I always feel like they word everything backwards on Magic cards, so I try to read them backwards like Yoda or something, but I guess they're trying to be very, very precise. So yeah, you can cast it when you draw it, which means you can't even put it into your hand, technically, is what they're trying to say. They're trying to say, you know, before you put it into your hand and dirtle and try to do other things for the turn, you have to, you know, reveal this and say, oh, this was the first card I drew for the turn. You know, otherwise no one's going to know if that's the first card you drew for the turn. Next we have Coat of Arms, 5 generic for an artifact. It says each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. So, for example, if 2 Goblin Warriors and a Goblin Shaman are on the battlefield, each get +2/+2. That's what it says on the card there. So, yeah, this, you want to wait to play this until you're about to win the game with it, you know. Sometimes it's going to go against you if you don't do that and someone else is running their own kind of tribal deck. But otherwise, you know, there's no harm in playing it if no one else is playing tribal but you. But it's definitely going to turn the board against you if you play it before you're going to win the game. So be prepared for that. Next we have our other sort of win condition. Doesn't necessarily win us the game, but it can. Insurrection, 5 generic and 3 red, so 8 mana total for a sorcery that says you untap all creatures and gain control of them until the end of the turn, and they gain haste until the end of the turn. So hopefully, you know, you'll be able to kill at least 2 opponents with this, 2 of the strongest opponents, hopefully, and then have the weakest opponent left over to finish them off later. You know, or maybe if you're lucky, you'll be able to kill all 3 at once with Insurrection. Really powerful spell, especially if you have some sort of sacrifice outlet and you can sacrifice all their creatures before they get them back. Next we have Mastermind's Acquisition, 2 and 2 black for a sorcery, and you choose one. You either search your library for a card and put it into your hand and then shuffle your library, or you choose a card you own from outside the game and put it into your hand. So this is, you know, kind of my budget-friendly tutor options. I have lots of decks, so my tutors have been spread thin. So, you know, it works, and we're in a long game format, so getting 4 mana isn't that hard. And that brings us to our lands. So we have 37 lands in the deck, and starting with the cycling lands, that means you can discard these cards from your hand and draw a card if you pay the cycling cost. So Forgotten Cave enters the battlefield, taps. It taps to add a red to your mana pool, or you can cycle it away for 1 red. Barren Moor enters tapped. It taps to add a black, or you can cycle it away for a black. Lonely Sandbar enters tapped. It taps to add a blue, or you can cycle it away for a blue. Next we have Desert of the Mindful, which is a desert, enters tapped. It taps for a blue, or you can cycle it away for 1 and a blue. And by the way, the cycling lands are really helpful for when you're mana flooded, which means you have too many lands on the battlefield already, and then you draw one of these cards. Well, you can pay the mana and get rid of it if you already have enough lands. That's a really great advantage with the cycling lands. So I put them in pretty much every commander deck. Next we have Bajuka Bog, which I put in pretty much every black deck. It enters tapped, it taps for a black, and when it enters the battlefield, you exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So yeah, little graveyard hate never hurts. Next we have Temple of the False God, which is a land that taps to add 2 mana to your mana pool. You can only activate this ability if you control 5 or more lands, but like I said, we're in a long game format, and if you don't end up getting 5 or more lands, you're probably going to lose the game anyway. So I've never regretted having this in a deck. I put it in pretty much every deck. Next we have Ghost Quarter, taps to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can tap and sacrifice it to destroy target land. Its controller may search his or her library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, or not tapped, just put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle his or her library. So our one little piece of land destruction, one of the more budget options for land destruction, so you'll see me putting in a lot of decks. Next we have Croesus's Catacombs, which is a strange land. I have some budget lands, I have to admit, in this deck, because this is kind of a new deck, you know, and I just kind of threw together what lands I had. So we got a few budget lands. So Croesus's Catacombs is a layer in addition to its other types. When it comes into play, you sacrifice it unless you return a non-layer you control to its owner's hand, and it taps to add a blue, black, or red to your mana pool. So what's cool about this is that it enters the battlefield untapped, and even though you return a land to your hand, you know, it could be a land that you've already tapped for mana, and you can replay that land later on anyway. So in a long game format, this isn't so bad. Next we have Command Tower, goes in pretty much every commander deck. Phyrexian Tower, taps to add a colorless, or you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to add 2 black mana to your mana pool. Little sacrifice outlet in case someone's trying to gain control of our creature or exile our creature, enchant our creature. Next we have Reliquary Tower, which is a land that says you have no maximum hand size, and it taps to add a colorless to your mana pool. So really important in any deck that has Ristic Study or, you know, Erebos, God of the Dead, you know, any cards that can draw us tons of cards. It's really important to have Reliquary Tower so we don't have to discard those cards. Next we have Dismal Blackwater, one of our really budget lands. I don't suggest you play with one. Drowned Catacomb, on the other hand, is a good land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island or a swamp, and it taps to add a blue or a black to your mana pool. Next we have Contreforts de Ombre Sang, which is French for Shadowblood Ridge. It's a signet land, so you can pay 1 mana and tap it, and it adds both a black and a red to your mana pool, so a little bit of mana fixing going on. Next we have Lava Claw Reaches, which enters tapped. It taps to add a red or a black to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 a black and a red, and until the end of the turn it becomes a 2/2 black and red elemental creature token, or elemental creature, which has fire breathing X, so you can pay X to give it plus X plus 0 till the end of the turn, and it's still a land. So a little creature in a land helps out with mana fixing too. Next we have Canyon Slough, which is a swamp and a mountain, and you can cycle it away for 2 mana, or it taps to add a black or a red to your mana pool, and it enters tapped. Next we have Swift Water Cliffs, which I don't suggest you get, just another budget option. Next we have Temple of Epiphany, which is a land that enters tapped, and when it enters the battlefield you get to scry 1, so you get to look at the top card of your library and put that card on the bottom if you want, and it taps to add a blue or red to your mana pool. We have Is It Boiler Works, which taps to add both a blue and a red to your mana pool. It enters tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you have to return a land you control to its owner's hand. So when you do that, make sure it's a land you've already tapped for mana, and hopefully a land that's going to enter the battlefield, and that's going to enter the battlefield untapped when it re-enters, you know, unless you want it to do something else, like some land that does something when it enters the battlefield. And then we have our basic lands. So we have 6 islands, 6 swamps, and 6 mountains. And that's it for Admiral Beckett Brass. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button or hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. This is Eric Scallywag from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.